Good morning to Dr. Junaida binti Hassan, lecturer of BEES3033, History of Economic Thought Group A. My name is Chua Wee Chan with metric number 271948. Our group members have Quan, Zhong, Lim Sam Yi, and Muhammad Muizzuddin bin Nasir. We are from Group 2 and our topic is discuss in detail Marx's law of motion of capitalism and briefly compare that theory with the theory of economic development by Adam Smith. First, I will introduce the founder of law of motion, which is Karl Marx. The real name of Karl Marx is Karl Henry Marx. He was born in Prussia, Germany, and studied law, history, and philosophy. Karl Marx received his degree of doctor at age of 23. After he got married, he turned into journalism, then exiled from Germany and went to Paris. In Paris, he met Engels that became his close friend, collaborator, and financial supporter. They two wrote the manifesto of the Communist Party in 1848. Marx also wrote many articles for New York Tribune. In 1867, he published his first volume of his magnum opus, Das Kapital, and Engels edited his manuscript and published Volume 2 and Volume 3. Next, Karl Kautsky published the remaining manuscript were left under the title Theory of Surplus Value. Several other intellectuals that influenced Marx, which are Ricardo, Darwin, Hegel, and Feuerbach. Now, let's take a look about the Marx theory of history. For Marx, history is a process truth which is a static ROP come into eventual conflict with a dynamic FOP. The result of conflict revolutionizes the system which is the new ROP, permit the higher development of the FOP. The mechanism for overthrowing all society is by the class struggle. In theory of history, Marx saw society evolving through 6 stages, which is primitive communism, slavery, feudalism, capitalism, socialism, and communism. The purpose of the assignments is to discuss in detail why the capitalism faced internal contradiction and caused class struggle that led into its being overthrown and replaced by socialism. In the law of motion of capitalism, Marx using theory of history as the backdrop. Marx solved the layback of the economic law of motion of modern society. Karl Marx want to determine the process truth which are the force of production FOP, wherein capitalism would produce their antithesis and inevitable demise. Just as has slavery and feudalism earlier, there are 6 important interrelated concepts in the law of motion of capitalism. They are labor theory of value, the theory of exploitation, capital accumulation, centralization of capital and concentration of wealth, reserve army for the unemployment and immiserization of the proletariat, and class conflict. According to Marx, because labor is the source of all value, surplus value and profit arise through exploitation of workers. Competition among capitalists result in capital accumulation, which cause a falling rate of profit, business crisis, and technological employment. This outcome produce centralization of capital and concentration of wealth, as well as rising unemployment and poverty. The polarization of capitalists and workers lead to class conflict and the overthrow of capitalism.
Labor theories of value is not a theory of price of things. The price of things depends on what is going on among people wanting to buy it and what's going on among the people wanting to sell it. Well, Karl Marx is interested in understanding how labor gets organized in society. So the labor theories of value was to say, let's look at the communities, things that are produced that we all need, by focusing on the labor in them because that will tell us something about the society. Laborers always produce a surplus of goods and service beyond what they get. In slavery, the workers are slaves and the master get it. In feudalism, the workers are served and the lords get it. And in the capitalist, the workers are employee and the employer get it. The labor theories of value look at the labor because it see in its arrangement who produce the surplus and who get it. For an example, suppose the average society necessary labor time to produce a pair of shoes is 10 hours. So the average social necessary labor time is equal to the level of the shoe. Even some workers will take less or take more time to produce that pair of shoe. For example, some competent workers take only 5 hours to produce a pair of shoe, while some incompetent worker will take 20 hours to produce a pair of shoe. The theory of exploitation, including labor time, labor power, surplus value, the rate of surplus value, and the rate of profit. Exploitation theory means that workers do not receive the full value of their labor because capitalists earn profit, which is surplus value, rather than only the replacement rate to pay for cost of capitals. Of course, the same amount of labor might produce two different products. For example, you could have a very nice wine or a very cheap wine that people won't pay much for it, and they might both produce the exact same amounts of labor, just different land. Labor power refers to a person's ability to work and produce commodity. Labor power itself a commodity that is bought and sold in the market. It is what the capitalists need to produce a profit. However, for labor time, the actual process and duration for work is considered normal condition of production and the average skill and intensity of labor at the time. Labor time includes the direct labor in producing the commodity. So, what determines the value of labor power? The society necessary labor time required to produce the cultural necessities of life consumed by the workers. For example, if the necessity could be produced in 4 hours per day, the value of commodities labor powers could be 4 hours of labor time per day. If the necessity could be produced on only 2 hours per day, the value of community labor powers will be 2 hours of labor time per day. And also, the market wages paid to the workers are according to their labor power. Next, exploitation labors only arise when workers can produce more in a day than they must consume in order to maintain themselves and their family. Employer pay the workers the full market values of their labor power, but the daily pay equals only part of the values of laborers create. The capitalists are in the position to set the length of the work days and in a sense says to the workers, work the numbers of hours that we say, or choose not to work for us at all. Necessities force the workers to optimum to work, but labor time they spend during the work days create a large sums of value than the value of their own. The owner of the means of production gains a surplus value. Marx designated the parts of capital invest in machinery and raw material as constant capital, while the capital is grown as wage for the purchase of labor power. The exact value is produced, which is capitalists take without the compensating the workers who produce it. It is called surplus value. So, the rate of surplus value is equal to the surplus value divided by the variable's capital and multiplied by 100. In this diagram show that the capitalists employ the laborer who they supply the required machinery to convert the raw cotton into yen. Suppose that in 6 hours of labor time, the total money cost of production is 15 ringgit, which is 3 ringgit for labor power, 10 ringgit for cotton, and 2 ringgit use up value of the spindles. According to Marx, the capitalist pay for the workers the market value of his labor power, which is the 6 hours of the labor time is sufficient to produce output to pay for its labor power, which is 3 ringgit. One way capitalists can gain profit is by lengthening the working days for labor without paying for their extra labor time, which is labor time is more than the labor power. For example, by focusing the workers to work an extra 6 hours, the capitalist secures a surplus value of 3 ringgit. The rate of exploitation is 100% because of 3 ringgits divided by 3 ringgits of labor powers paid to the laborers and multiples by 100, which is 100% of rate of exploitation. If the capitalists want to gain extra surplus value, they can force their workers to work more another 6 hours. The capitalists secure another surplus value of 3 ringgit. The rate of exploitation is 200, which is 6 ringgits of surplus value divided by 3 ringgits of labor's powers and multiplied by 100. Conclusion: by asking the workers to act extra hours, the labor can be exploited by their employer to gain more profit. In this diagram is the examples of calculation of rate of surplus value. There are two modes of exploitation, which is lengthen working days or increased productivity. Even if working days are not lengthened, surplus value could be increased by raising the efficiency production and thus reducing the values of the workers' labor powers. If the workers' necessity could be produced in a short time, a large share of a new values could be goes to the capitalists. Suppose the working days were shortened from 12 hours to 10, but instead of being divided in 6 hours of paid labors for the workers and 6 for the capitalists, it was divided into 4 of the workers and 6 hours of capitalists. The rate of exploitation could be raised from 100% to 150%. So, how we calculate the rate of profit? The rate of profit is calculated by the surplus value divided by the constant capital and the variable capital. So, for an example, the total cost of production for 12 hours is equal to the 15 ringgit plus 12 ringgit equals to the 27 ringgit. So, the surplus value for 12 hours is equal to 3 ringgit. So, how about the rate of profit? So, the rate of profit is equal to the 3 ringgit divided by 27 ringgit and multiplied by 100 equal to 11.1%.
So, I will be the next presenter. Good morning, madam. My name is Zhong and my matrix number is 269-865. So now, I want to present the capital accumulate and the filing rate of profit. First, what is capital accumulation? They is typically refer to an increase in asset for investment of profit and is one of the building block of capitalist economy. And then the individual and the company can accumulate the capital through the investment. So next, falling rate of profit. For the question, rate of profit tend to fall over the long run. Why? Because there are two reasons. The first is mechanization and the second is labor saving inversion. For the first, mechanization, the described to improve productivity by using the machinery. And then the labor saving inversion, the replacement of labor with the machine. So according to the KUMP max, it will raise the organic composition of capital. So this is the formula for the rate of profit. And then we can get the organic composition of capital, where is Q. And then we use the constant capital to divide the total capital. That means this is the constant capital and then this is variable capital. We pass it to the total capital. So we can get the organic composition of capital. Okay. Next, there are the alternative of profit rate equation. So the new formula indicates that the rate of profit and then the surplus value and then the composition of capital, organic composition of capital. So there are relationship between the rate of profit and the Q and S. The rate of profits have the relation inversely with the organic composition of capital, means Q lah, and then have the relationship directly with the rate of surplus value. If the capitalists invest more of machinery and then less of labor, then the Q will increase and then the P will decrease. Okay, why capitalists still use the machinery instead of labor even though they know the profit will fall? There are two reasons. First is the promoting efficiency production. When we use the machinery, the production cost will decrease, and then the other firm who cannot compete with the company will leave the market. The second reason is the greater the efficiency of production, the low of the value of labor power. That means the number of hours required to produce the subsistence and the greater the total amount of profit produced per working days. The theory is the dynamic of capitalists lead to an increase of organic composition of capital. So next, offsetting force to the falling net of profit. So first is increase the intensity of exploitation. The firm will force the worker to work and speed up and then extend their working days. And the second is the wage temporarily will be cut below their video. So next is constant capital may be cheapened. The machinery and raw material become cheaper and then they will slow on the organic compositor of capital rise and the rate of profit decrease. And the next, by reduce the element of constant capital and the necessity of life, the foreign tax increase the rate of profit. And then the next is increased population in the relation to job and the increase of technologically unemployment will make a new industry that will use more labor and a little capital. Next is the business crisis, the CMC. The CMC is Marx attacked the Say's law. He said that the better apply only to simple community production. In this situation, the money is just a medium of exchange. And then the MCM is in the situation the money changed into the commodities and then they inform at the large set capitalist production and then people buy in order to sell. So the next is MC empire. Empire is larger than N because the exploitation of labor power. And then this process of expanding the investment for capital accumulation. Next is the business cycle. The rapid investment in capital and labor temporarily increase the demand of labor and increase the wage that capitalists must be paid. However, the higher wage reduce the rate of surplus value and the profit, ending the expansion and sending the economy in the opposite direction. And the depreciation that result destroy the monetary value of fixed capital, then enabling the larger capitalists to buy up smaller ones at a bargain price. The some factories are closed, the price of commodities fall, and then credit contract and the wage also fall. So the rate of surplus value and the profit to scarce restore and it must increase again. According to Marx, each business cycle is of greater magnitude than the previous one, adding to the condition that produce class structure and the social evolution. The next thing I would like to present is the technological unemployment. The rate of unemployment increase because labor is substituted with the capital, and then the robot. Since the machinery and the technology, robot is efficiency than the labor, so the labor was unemployment. So next is the centralization of capital and concentration of wealth. The first is growing size of a firm, weakness of the competitor into fewer hands. And the second is emerging of monopoly power occurred due to the increase of capital centralization and concentration. The third is larger firms able to obtain the economy of scale and producing at a lower average cost as compared to smaller firms. And then the elimination of the smaller firm and the growth of monopoly firm occurred when there is in the competition between the larger, the lower cost firm and the small firm. And then the next is capital accumulation, economy of scale and the dominance of the corporation in business organization will bring to the concentration and centralization of the capital in fewer hands. So next is reserve army of the employer and immunization of the proletariat. So labor was replaced by the machine, then the employment rate is increased. The worker is forced to work sufficiently long to create a surplus value of the capitalist. And then labor were poor and jobless. And the market base is sufficient only to purchase the cultural subsistence required for to survival and perpetuation of the labor force. Okay, that is all for me. I will pass to the next presenter. Thank you, madam.
Next, class conflict. The concentration of wealth among fevers and fevers capitalists, as well as absolute and relative impoverishment of workers, lead to class conflict. Capitalists accumulate their wealth by exploiting workers. The growth of misery, oppressions, salary degradations, exploitation of workers raise their sense of solidarity and will to be rewarded. The relation of production under the capitalists come in conflict with the force of production, and the formers are rapidly transformed. The workers overthrew the capitalists and established a direct dictator of the proletariat. Private ownership is replaced by state ownership of production. The rate of capital expansion is stabilized and exploitation of workers is eliminated.
Hello everyone, my name is Chua Wee Chan with metric number 272015, and I would like to continue the presentation with the part of Adam Smith. The theory that initiated by the Adam Smith is theory of economic development. In this theory of development economic by Adam Smith, the division of labor is still unfamiliar. At that time, the Adam Smith is writing the Book of Wealth of Nations. In the Book of Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith says that labor will be more productive if there is a division of labor. The Adam Smith also argued only the division of labor can lead to the capital rising in flow A, but the opposite may also occur if the division of labor begin. The next one is labor distribution and the capital rising. These two topic is the major factor that can contribute to the labor productivity in the flow B and flow C. Labor division and capital rising will increase the productivity of labor as it will save the time, increase labor skill, and also promote the creation like a new machine. Division of labor, also known as DOL, will increase the quantity of the output for three main regions. The first region is the each worker develop increased dexterity in performing one single task repeatedly. The second reason is time is saved if the worker no need to go from one kind of work to another one kind of work. The last reason is machinery can be invented to increase productivity once the task has been simplified and made through the DOL division of labor. The division of labor also may cause the increased productivity and will increase the amount of the country output in the flow D. The division of labor will increase in output, promoting consumption, thereby increasing the nation wealth in the flow E. In the book of Adam Smith, Wealth of the Nation, he also said that the increase in the output will also increase the distribution of labor and increase in capital stock as excessive output will be exported. In the flow F, the capital rising will increase the waste fund that stay in the wealth of the nation in the flow G.
Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Muizzuddin bin Nasir and my metric number is 264232. Now, I will continue my group presentation on comparison between Karl Marx's law of motion of capitalism and Adam Smith's theory of economic development. Okay, for this slide, I'm pretty sure that you have seen this before. Both of these are already explained by my fellow groupmates before. Both of these flowchart define the ideas or theories of Marx's law of motion and also Adam Smith's theory of economic development respectively. Alright, let's look on the Karl Marx law of motion of capitalism first. According to Marx, capital accumulation will cause a falling rate of profit, business crisis, and also technological unemployment. Next, these outcomes will produce the centralization of capital and concentration of wealth, as well as rising unemployment and also poverty. So lastly, it will lead to the polarization of capitalists and workers, which will lead to a class conflict and then the collapse of the capitalism. Now, let's move on to the Adam Smith theory of economic development. Smith first contended that the division of labor spurs the capital accumulation. Then, both division of labor and capital accumulation work together to increase labor productivity. With the rise of the labor productivity, the national output increases, which widens the market and justifies further division of labor and also capital accumulation. So as a result of that, of capital accumulation, the wages fund increases and wages also rise. Higher wages will surely motivate further productivity growth. And lastly, the rise in national output will surely increase the goods available for consumption, thus constitutes the wealth of a nation. For this last slide, it is about a conclusion. I will conclude the comparison between Karl Marx's law of motion of capitalism with Adam Smith's theory of economic development. Okay, for the first one, Karl Marx believed that capital accumulation will bring negative effects, while Adam Smith believed that capital accumulation will bring positive effects. Next, according to Karl Marx's law of motion theory, capital accumulation will cause a falling rate of profit, business crisis, and also technological unemployment, while according to Smith's theory of economic development, the division of labor will spurs the capital accumulation. So, for the third one, these outcomes produce centralization of capital and concentration of wealth, as well as rising unemployment and poverty. While for Adam Smith's theory of economic development, both division of labor and capital accumulation will increase labor productivity and then increases the national output. So for the last one, the polarization of capitalists and workers leads to class conflict and the collapse of capitalism for Karl Marx's law of motion of capitalism, while for Adam Smith's theory of economic development, it will show a result of capital accumulation, wages fund increases and wages will rise, and it will motivate further productivity growth. The rise in national output increases, so the goods available for consumption thus constitute the wealth of nation. That's all from me. Thank you.